There's something.
Try it again. Check, check. All right, guys. If I can get everybody to take their seats so we can get going, we got a full amount of time that we need to get in for this new series. So if you don't mind, let's, you're going to tilt the boat. Everybody sitting on this side, you're going to see the seats start to go like this. Good morning.
Good morning.
Glad you guys are here. Glad you guys are willing to invest in your relationship or future relationship. Well, those of you that are single. Now, if you're with somebody, I don't want to talk about a future relationship. All right. So, did everyone get a lesson? One per couple. Everyone has a lesson? Yes? No? Okay. And the other thing is, did everybody get a save the date card? I keep hearing no's. Huh? Yeah, well, you never know. You know on everything. All right. What do you need? You need everything? It's Marcos' fault. It's pretty much Marcos' fault.
You brought it down.
John doesn't have anything. All right. Well, I'm glad that you guys are here. This is a series that we have not done before. You're going to find that this is going to be a little bit deeper than normal. That could be a good thing. It will be a good thing. But you just have to, I hope that you are mentally prepared, that you prepared your hearts to receive whatever God's going to bring you through this series. It's going to be a tough series. So, I don't mean tough in the way like tough. It's going to be like, it's going to make you tough. Okay? We can all use a little bit of that. So we're going to have Claudina pray, and then we're going to go into it. It is a DVD series, so we'll be watching a little video, coming back and talking, watching a little video, coming back and talking. And let's go. So let's pray.
Heavenly Father, we are just so grateful, Lord, for your love and for your grace, Lord God. We just ask that every single person, Lord God, that is in this room, that enters and is part of this series, Lord God, would just be blessed. That every single marriage, Lord God, would take the information given and apply it to their relationship. Thank you, Heavenly Father, for the beautiful gift that marriage is, Lord, and the wonderful opportunity to represent you, Father, through our marriage on planet Earth. We just commit this morning to you. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. So, for those of you that are here for the first time, we welcome you. But nonetheless, for all of you that are here for this series, that kind of means to me that most likely marriage is important to you. And maybe you're in a situation or a place right now in your relationship where you are happy in your marriage and you want to continue to keep it growing and investing in it. Or maybe you're struggling in your relationship, dealing with a major problem or a minor problem or whatever the case may be. Or maybe you're single and you want to prepare for your future marriage. Or maybe you even are divorced and you want to prevent the pain that you went through before if you decide to get remarried. A lifetime of love and a lifetime of commitment to one person, I know you're thinking is really hard, but it's actually one of the greatest gifts that God has given to us. Marriage is one of God's best designs. It's one that He chose as the metaphor to describe our relationship with Him. It's the mystery of living as one flesh with another human being. Marriage is about love. It's about being bound together by care and by need and by companionship and the values of two people. And when you put those two together and the two work together, they can overcome hurt and they can overcome immaturity and they can overcome selfishness to form something better than what each person could possibly produce by themselves. Love is at the heart of marriage, as it is at the heart of God Himself. And although love is at the heart of marriage, love is certainly not enough. A marriage relationship needs lots of other ingredients to grow, and for lack of better terms, to thrive. And those kind of ingredients are freedom, and responsibility. Now, don't leave here today going, didn't you hear PA say, I need freedom in this relationship? Okay? We're going to talk about the kind of freedom that we're talking about. And when two people are free to disagree, they're free to love. We've talked about it enough times to understand that we are individual people. We're not always going to agree, and that's okay. And when people are not free, they live in fear, and then love dies. When two people together can take responsibility to do what's best for the marriage, well, love can grow. And when they don't, one takes on too much responsibility, and then the other person winds up resenting it. And the other person doesn't take on enough and becomes self-centered or controlling. Now, the video is about promoting, growing, developing, and repairing love in a marriage. And we want to help strengthen your love for your spouse by providing a better environment for it. One that includes freedom and that includes responsibility. This is where boundaries or personal property lines come in. They promote love by protecting the people. So we need to make clear that this boundaries in marriage curriculum is not about fixing or changing or punishing your mate. If you're not in control of yourself, then the solution isn't learning to control someone else. The solution is learning self-control for yourself. The curriculum is about taking ownership of your own life so that you're protected, so that you can love and protect your spouse without enabling them or rescuing them. Finally, there's work to do on your own boundaries in marriage. When you take the initiative to deal with it, it's going to affect the rest of your married life. And what you ignore or you're afraid to address will absolutely have the same effect. So, welcome to the Boundaries in Marriage. We hope it's helpful, whatever condition your marriage is in. We pray that as you learn to make the word boundaries a good word in your marriage, responsibility and freedom is going to help love take root in both of your hearts. Cool? You got it all quiet. All right, so let's take a look at the video and then we'll come back and talk about it. I diligently worked hard at putting your worksheet together. So we're going to look at this time for thought, a look in the mirror. But let me just kind of go over a couple of the things from the video. I know it's only 2 minutes, but you'd be amazed at what you picked up in 2 minutes that you may not even realize. If you think about freedom and responsibility and love, something incredible happens as the three of those ingredients work together. Stephanie was suffering from emotional distance that being on the wrong side of a one-sided relationship creates. Maybe some of you can relate to that. Stephanie realized that there was really very little of her in that marriage. She had adapted to her husband and complied with him so much that she couldn't even remember what it felt like to be herself. Stephanie realized that she couldn't be the blame, or she couldn't blame Steve for her loss of herself. She was the one who was afraid to conflict. Now, I'm not trying to tell you, don't be afraid to have conflict. But how many of you know how important it is, if you're dealing with somebody that, gets angry all the time, or you're at the losing end of a disagreement every time because they flip out, you can't vent how you really feel, you're not really being yourself. You're afraid to disagree with that person because of the repercussions, because of what can happen. Don't raise your hand and say, I know what you're talking about, Pastor. But there's people out there that are like that. When you don't comply to the other person's wishes, then we wind up taking ownership of ourselves being passive. But she did take responsibility for her own misery, and it started working on her, and it started working on the relationship. And she didn't, like a lot of other people do, leave the relationship to find herself. But when she takes ownership and responsibility for her life, then he's forced to take responsibility for his life, and the relationship can improve. And then the other person can learn to love their spouse's freedom. And you might even find yourself being attracted to that independence instead of being threatened by it. So if you were to look at your notes and look at self-reflection, being able to look in the mirror at your own personal situation, your own relationship, what, if anything, did you see of yourself and your marriage in Stephanie's situation? You know, anybody relate? I know. You sitting here and you'd be like, do you realize someone's sitting right next to me? That
I think we can all relate in some way, because it's never what we thought it was going to be when we get married. I think that things change, people change, and then you really don't know somebody until you live with them. So I'm pretty sure we all should have our friends that are like, you know, I can relate with somebody.
Can anybody say that marriage is exactly how you thought it was going to be? Why you laugh? You go into it with a certain expectation of, oh, I know how it's going to be, and then you find out it's not close to that. Oh yeah, there's some times where it's like, you know, you're my best friend, you're my this, you're my that, and then there's other times it's like, what did I do? What did I commit myself to? I remember standing up and saying, till death do you part? Oh my God, I want to die. It's a lifelong commitment. If you were Stephanie, what could you do to improve your relationship? See, here's protection for you, so you know, maybe you are Stephanie. But if you were Stephanie, what would you do to improve the situation? Yes?
Let her husband know how important it is for her, so he truly understands to finish her degree. But she had a little expectation over that. And maybe he knows, but maybe he doesn't know how intensely it's affecting her, to where she's downstairs talking to a friend or whatever about it.
Excellent point. You know, if you go to the other person in the relationship, and you know, guys, you know, we talk about how this is mainly structured for your marriage, but this goes, you know, boundaries in relationships goes way beyond just your marriage. Boundaries in relationships can deal with your coworkers, relatives, friends, whatever the case may be. But look, we're talking specifically of your marriage. And if you go to the other person and you openly speak to them, not in an aggravated, assaulting, condescending kind of way, how is it that the other person cannot be receptive to listening? How is it that they can't? If you go and you're expressing how important something is the other person really going to be like, well, I don't care? I would hope not.
Well, I'm looking at the situation from different angles. We really don't know if Stephanie is just really just beating herself up and allowing the enemy to make her resentful against her husband, because we really don't know what season they're in. And it's important to see, especially when you're younger and you're married, especially when, you know, you have to learn to navigate the seasons of your marriage. Sometimes you don't see it until later. So from personal experience, I would think that she's resentful that her husband does have a degree. She wanted that too, and now she's upset and she's allowing this resentment to grow in her heart, which is not good for the marriage. But this could just be something, it's a season that they're in right now.
Okay. Well, and bottom line is that communication, everything falls back to communication in a relationship, right? If you can't communicate with the other person and express to them how you're truly feeling, you know, Claudina and I had a situation, I don't remember exactly what it was, Friday or Saturday morning, she said something to me And I said, and I didn't understand. Now, I know after being married a certain period of time, you know, it's like, oh, you know, I love the way that my husband or wife knows exactly what I'm thinking and can, oh, stop, you know? So Claudina's trying to tell me something, and she says something, and I go, what do you mean? And she goes, you know. I said, no. I said, we are not linked up telepathically to where I can understand. But I really did say that. And she looked at me like, what? What do you mean? And she said something, but she assumed that I knew what she meant in regards to, I don't remember exactly what it was, but she said, turn on something or turn up something or close something or whatever it was.
Something small, like,
Yeah, it was.
turn on the thing. Well, what thing?
Yeah, exactly. It was like turn up the thing or turn on the thing. What thing? You know? I don't really know, but she expected, but I don't want to, like, the bottom line is you need to have that comfort level to be able to express to the other person how you feel without the other person going off the deep end. Would you agree with that? Yes?
Yes.
Now, if you were the guy in this situation, and I know the situation's a little vague, like Claudina said, but you get the gist of the situation. If you were the guy, Steve, what would you want Stephanie to do to let you know that she's drifting away from you? Would you want her to say something to you?
Yeah.
Or do you think that being so wrapped up in your career and your, you know, being a lawyer or going to school for that or whatever is more important than whatever it is that your spouse is feeling? You cannot think that your feelings, that your thought process, that your anticipation of things is more important than your spouse's. You know, we love to say that marriage is 50-50, marriage is 100-100, whatever percentages you want to put to it. The bottom line is that the other person is just as important in the relationship as you are. Because if you think less than that, then really it's not one of those equality relationships. Now, I know that there's going to be times in your relationship where you may feel as though that, well, they're getting the better end of the deal right now. I've sacrificed so that they can do this. Well, that's part of a relationship. Sacrifice. Giving of. Taking away from. Yes?
One of the parts in there, she said, he doesn't seem like the man I married. Well, so she may be feeling that she's just a possession now. And I've seen that in my marriage, so I have to be careful. The way I treat her is not that way at all. Because so that may be something that she's dealing with, that they have to talk about.
You know, again, going back to when you first got married versus your current situation, there are things that are the same that you can say, oh, they are the same person that I married. But the majority of those things are not. Man, if you got married when you were 20 or 30 or 40, and no matter how long you've been married now, whether you're 25 or 30 or 50 now, you don't think you've changed over the time, over the years? You may not have the same sleeping habits. You may not have the same music taste. You may not have the, you know, how many of you remember growing up and going, excuse me, I hate tomatoes. Let's just use tomatoes as an example. As a kid, I couldn't stand tomatoes, but I've always been a ketchup freak. I mean, like I put ketchup on everything. But I can't stand tomatoes, right? That ooey gooey inside thing is like, okay? Now, I'm older. That's messed up, Lanny. And I like tomatoes. I still don't like the ooey gooey inside, but I like a firm, good Roma tomato that's got, you know, put some salt on there, and man, or a good cherry tomato that's really hard, you know? But I've changed. I know that that's minimal, and you go, well, how does that affect your marriage? It really doesn't, but if I all of a sudden like a certain food and then I become allergic to it, and that happens to be her favorite food, things change. My sleeping pattern changed. I used to be the guy that's like, oh man, go to bed 10, 11, 12, 1, you know, we're doing, man, if I make it to 10 o'clock, I am lucky, okay? Like last night I went to bed, I think I must have been in bed at 9 o'clock, 9:45. I come to see my wife in the morning. I said, good morning, what time do you go to bed? She was like, midnight. I'm like, what? Well, you are a rock star. Staying up till midnight. I can't even do that anymore. Not even if I was out somewhere, you'd have to put me on crutches and put toothpicks in my eyes to hold me up. But if that was a problem, you know, if you're that kind of person, it's like, listen, when I go to bed, you go to bed. I don't care if you're awake. I don't care. You're going to fake sleeping next to me because you're going to bed. That's really, you know. If the other person's not tired, why are you so hooked on the fact that they got to go to bed the same time as you? Well, we're married. We're soul partners. Yeah, but I'm not tired. Okay? You go to sleep. God bless you. You know, I'll see you in the morning. Do you see how some of those things can have an effect? If you want to be able to have things in your relationship grow, there's no growth without communication. Communication has got to be one of your #1 priorities in your relationship. I know a lot of people say, you know, and Claudina's big on pick your battles. Yeah, you don't have to nitpick about every little thing, but if you have issues with certain things, you need to bring them up. But it's not the issues that you bring up, it's how you bring them up.
And when you bring them up.
You need to be able to go to your partner and be able to say, listen, I need to communicate something to you about the way that I feel about this, or the way I feel about this.
I notice that I have to watch myself because I will nitpick and bring up a lot of things that I'm not happy with. But if that ratio is off, I can be tearing my husband down instead of building him up. So there are times that you have to be purposeful. Even some things are just not worth bringing up if they're not going to build or edify, and it's not really going to make a difference in a week. So you have to be careful, and that's one of the things. And I know, well, do you really want to sweep it? That's not the point. The point is, how is this helping our marriage as a whole? Not how it's helping me. And I love what you said earlier, where the other person is just as important in this relationship as I am. That's a powerful, powerful revelation. Because the moment that you start to think that you are more important, and your feelings are more important, and what you're going through is more important, you're not balanced anymore. And there is a danger there.
How many people would say that you feel as though that you're a sensitive person? Raise your hand.
You're what?
Sensitive, that you're sensitive. Come on, put them up. Let me see. I want to see how many guys actually have the guts to put up their hands. I consider myself a sensitive person. I've told you before, I'm that kind of person that can be watching a sitcom on TV, and if the theme of the TV show is something family-oriented or something like that, I get that lump in my throat, and I feel like I want to start tearing down, or if I can't watch those commercials for dog rescues because I love dogs sometimes more than I love other things. But, you know, I consider myself an extremely sensitive person. Now, if you incorporate that into the relationship aspect of it, if the other person is constantly, like Claudina said, you know, you don't want that to be to where somebody, here, let me put it to you this way. When we talk about abuse, the first thing that comes to your mind is the physical aspect of abuse, right? You think about the other person being physically abusive. But how many of you know, which hopefully you do, there's so many more forms of abuse than just physical abuse. There's verbal abuse, there's emotional abuse, there's psychological abuse, right? So if you're the kind of person that does not have that freedom and that love to express to the other person how you're feeling, they can get you to the point where you believe everything because you've been psychologically manipulated or verbally manipulated or emotionally manipulated to believe that you're wrong, they're right, your feelings don't matter, their feelings do, and it's all about the other person. Yes?
I think that in relationships, some people make it that way for themselves because some people get lost in the fact that they want to make the relationship the best that they can, that all they want to do is please the other person in the sense like, well, where do you want to go? What do you want to do? Oh, it doesn't matter, whatever you want to do. It's like always falling on that person to decide whether the relationship is going to head. And some people are okay with it. Some people do it and unwillingly knowing that they're making themselves, they're setting themselves up to feel regret later on down the line.
Right.
Because what happens is they lose the ability to start saying, hey, this is how I feel, because you relinquish that power so long by trying to make that other person happy, and you get lost.
And just to piggyback on that, it could be something as simple as, where do you want to go eat? I don't care, wherever you choose. So the other person chooses all the time. And then, for some reason, a wild hair grows, and on that particular day, you have a problem with where they want to go to eat, because like, you're always picking where we go to eat. But you said, now all of a sudden, and that happens, and listen, because we're human and we're emotionally charged and everything, and those things are gonna happen, you know, to where it's gonna build up, and at some point, it's going to change your mentality. Let's watch the next part of the video that talks about love, freedom, and responsibility. All right, so now you got time to hear from the main guys, Now, we're in your notes where it's talking about love, freedom, and responsibility. It's about being bound together by the care, need, and companionship and values of two people, which can overcome the hurts and the immaturities and the selfishness to form something better than what each person can do all by themselves. Love is at the heart of marriage, which is at the heart of God Himself. And that comes out of, just in case you take notes or anything like that, that's 1 John 4:16. It's in your notes. It says we know how much God loves us and we put our trust in His love. God is love, and all who live in love live in God, and God lives in them. That's a lot of lives and loves. Okay? But it's true. And you have to think about the times that maybe you've seen or even experienced a partnership of marriage being something better than what each person can produce by themselves. Maybe you saw that in your parents. Maybe you saw that in your grandparents. Maybe you see that in somebody else, a friend or a relative, or maybe you even see that in your relationship. But when you see that partnership really being a partnership, it's amazing when you can actually look at and see what you can produce as a couple, as opposed to being able to work at it by yourselves. When each person in the relationship has the ability and the freedom to disagree, then we have the freedom to love. And when they're not free, they interfere. We talk about love dying. And we don't want that to happen. Now, if I asked you, why do you think that genuine love allows the freedom to disagree? Why does love allow you to disagree?
Love has compassion.
What's that?
Love has compassion.
Okay, love has compassion. Monique?
Because love is safe, and when you know you're loved, you're gonna feel safe.
Okay, what else? Bruce?
Growth
Growth?
in your relationship, period.
Okay. Anybody else? That's it. Brian?
Love esteems the other person and their feelings above their own.
Okay. So, you know, one of the things that we need to learn to do in our relationships is there are so many outside influences on our relationships. You know, we talk about the job and the kids and the in-laws and the outlaws and the, you know, cousins and the coworkers and the family and the friends and all these other things that that are outside influences on our relationship. And the one thing that we need to be able to do is we have to understand that when we are together as a couple, that should be your safe place. That should be the place where you feel safest of all. In every aspect of your being is with that other person. Whether you're driving somewhere, whether you're in the confines of your own home, whatever the case may be, you need to be able to have that safe place. And when we can actually realize, okay, I'm home. And you need to be able to take that step back and realize, okay, I just need to decompress for a minute, and I need to let all those outside pressures go away, whether it's from work or ministry or in-laws or whatever the case may be. And before that conversation happens, whatever it is that you're going to discuss or talk or whatever the case may be, you need to be able to just, it's almost like reminding yourself before you walk in the door, take that imaginary chill pill. It's like, okay, I'm home. And just get yourself in that mindset of the fact that, okay, I'm going to let the cares of the world go away because now I'm in my safe place,
I'd like to think that, when you get married, the growth and the journey that you go through it is a beautiful journey. It's difficult at times. And you have to be able to see it from different perspectives so that you don't get discouraged, because your spouse was given to you so you can grow. And you can, we talked about this before, who better than your spouse to know you're operating with the fruit of the Spirit, love. But I'd like to think that in the season that I'm in right now, and I like to say I've made a lot of rookie mistakes in my life, and even though I'm kind of middle-aged now, but I feel like you need to qualify the friendships that you have, because they can affect your marriage. And I'm in that season now where I'm qualifying, because if it's not adding to our marriage, if it's hurting, if it's, whether it's in-laws, outlaws, cousins, whatever the case may be, if it affects the way that I'm going to treat my family, then it's a problem. Mm-hmm. The other thing is, your spouse needs to feel safe at home, because the world is a hard place. Your spouse is out there, especially if they are the breadwinner, and in most cases it's two people. That's why the home is a safe place. If they can't feel loved and respected at home, then where can they feel loved and respected? They go out there into the harsh world. They have to deal with personalities. They have to deal with being put down. They have to deal with deadlines. They have to deal with disrespect. When they come home, they should have love and respect. That should be their safety. That's going to make your spouse want to come home in a hurry.
When I remember for a long time when Claudine and I got married, and I hope you guys understand, it's not easy being transparent with you guys and opening up our lives and our relationship and all the things that we've gone through with y'all, because, but we do because we want, what better example than the things that we've learned through the relationship and through Fusion and through life than to be able to share our own things. But for the longest time, we had a really hard time allowing the other person to disagree with us. We spent so much of our time and effort trying to convince the other person of why their opinion was wrong and that they needed to agree with the other person. And then we finally came, I don't remember exactly when the epiphany happened, but we finally came to the understanding that it's like, wait a second, it's okay to agree to disagree. I can't expect you to agree with everything that I think, and you cannot expect me to agree with everything that you think. But together we can agree to disagree, and then we just move on from there.
The most dangerous season in that winning the argument was when one of us felt like we were more spiritual than the other. The word God said, and the motivation behind it was manipulative. And whenever the motivation, whatever the driving force is of what you're trying to accomplish, that's the fruit you're going to receive. So and we have to be very careful, because that's very real. It's happened to us in our early marriage where maybe God did say, but you know what, if God said it, God has the ability to speak to your spouse without you trying to win the argument and using that I'm going to win, I'm right, because I hear from God attitude as the driving force to get my way. Because now the motivation has changed. It's no longer being done in love. It's being done to win and show you I'm right.
Right, and so you get the attitude of the other person doesn't agree. It's like, fine. I hope you get proven wrong. I hope you get shown that you were wrong and I was right. And then when something happens, you're like, I'm in it. Ándale, I told you, right? Did you want to listen to me? No, you didn't want to listen to me. I'm like the Wizard of Oz. I have all the answers, okay? And that's not really the right attitude that we want people to have in the relationship, because if you really feel convicted of something that you really feel, then you need to express yourself and not take, if that person, listen, we know that we drag stuff in from our past into our relationship, from our upbringing, from our parents, from all these different influences. And it's like, so you may be a person that can rationalize maybe a little better than your spouse. And the other one is so hard-headed and so bent on being right and everything else that it really doesn't matter what you say. You can't be the one that's, okay, fine. Go figure it out for yourself. Go experience it for yourself. Go do it yourself. You have to become more passionate about learning how to communicate to your spouse why. You have to have that freedom to be able to express why you are so passionate about them not doing that, or doing it in a different way, or whatever the case may be. Yes?
So if they're not willing to, they're not there yet where they're willing to accept that maybe sometimes you know, because either you've been there or you've watched somebody else get there, and they're just not ready to accept that.
You know that there is no solution to hard-headedness as of yet. I mean, those are times where your spiritual man needs to take over, spiritual woman needs to take over, and you need to pray. You need to pray that your spouse, God, open their ears, open their eyes, open their hearts to the things that, let them understand that I'm not trying to be a direct contradiction to what their thought process is, but rather a helpmate as to what it is. But one of the things that you need to keep trying, we've talked about making a plan to obtain a goal. Every goal has to have a plan and steps to obtain the plan, right? But failure is only when you stop trying. So if you have the mindset of, I've tried and I've tried and I've said and they don't listen, keep trying. It doesn't matter if they haven't gotten it yet. Your patience is being tested and grown. Your love is being tested and grown. Your patience, your everything, And we're all going to tell Corey that you said that. But
It's hard to sit back when you're trying to say something and they're going that way and you know they're doing it the hard way. And then they get there and they're like, oh.
well, and sometimes they just have to, you just have to say, listen, I know it's easy in theory, but sometimes you just have to say, listen, sit down. Let me just talk to you for a second. I want you to understand I'm not trying to say that you don't get it or anything like that, but I really think you need to hear what I have to say. And it's all, again, it's not what you say, it's how you say it. So if you have the attitude of you go into a conversation of, you're just going to screw that up, okay? I'm just going to just forget it. You don't want to listen to me, fine, you. Or if you approach it in a completely different manner of, listen, I love you. Sit down for a second. Let me just, share my heart with you. Who's going to go? I don't care about your heart. I don't want to hear your heart. And then, hopefully you're asking God to give you wisdom when you speak. Every time I get up and I facilitate a class, or I'm going to pray, or I'm going to preach or anything, man, I know I ain't that smart. So I have to rely on God to give me some wisdom. If I'm up here, trust me when I tell you, my notes are no different than yours. So if I go off on a rabbit trail, is what we professionally call that, and I start telling you a story or relating a situation in our relationship, I believe that's God giving me wisdom for that moment to be able to share with you something that you're going to be able to cling on to.
I think that if there is a situation in your marriage that's not life-threatening or going to cause extreme harm, I think a lot of times we get so upset. And in those cases, we do need to speak up and say something because it affects the whole family. But I think the hardest challenge for me, and it was a beautiful revelation, was that I have to pray and ask God to help me be okay with when we, like in the early stages of our marriage, when you got saved after, help me be okay with where you're at now. I'm not gonna let your journey, you're growing, and as long as you're growing, but that could be something that trips up marriages so much. He's not at my level. He's not, and now you're losing peace. Now the things of God are causing harm, hardship, your arguments, and that's not the way it should be. But you have to be very careful and very guarded that you don't allow disunity or have the joy taken out of your relationship, because you cannot be okay with your spouse's journey and where they're at in their walk with the Lord. God will finish what He started. It's His promise. And he may or she may not be where you're at, and we've talked about this before. Do not allow that to rob you from the beautiful relationship that you do have and having good times.
That's good. Okay, we got to move on. Let's watch the next part of the video that talks about the boundaries. We want you to be able to learn how to have the freedom to be able to express yourself to your spouse without it turning into a problem. We want to be able to identify what our property lines really are. The most basic boundary is language. The words that we use help define us. They tell the other person who you are, what you believe, what you want, what you don't want. Right? So everybody's got boundary setting words that you guys have used personal to your relationship, some of which I'm sure cannot be repeated. But you have a way of saying no, right? You may put a word in front of it, but you communicate that no. You can turn around and say it your own way. But what about when your spouse has those boundary setting words too? Do you recognize that when your spouse says something, it's the terminology that they use, okay, that's it, I can't push anymore. That's kind of the edge of the road, the end of the line. You know your spouse well enough to know that, right? Y'all get what I'm saying?
Yes.
When you grow with somebody, when you have a relationship with somebody for a period of time, you learn them. You learn what buttons you can push, what buttons you can't push, and how long you can push them. Right?
Right.
And so there's terminology that gets used in the relationship, and once that word gets brought up, that's it. That's the timeout. If I've reached that point, sometimes you go over that ledge and there's nowhere to go but down. So, when you choose silence rather than boundary setting words, that causes a problem. There has to be that open communication. And don't get me wrong, there are times in the relationship where you need to know, don't say anything. But there's a difference between, again, remember I said, you hope that God gives you wisdom? God will tell you, shut up. Don't say anything. You're gonna get it? Just be quiet. Don't say anything. And you just have to look with that, puppy dog eyes, with that look on your face, and just kind of hang in there and believe that God's truth, God's principles, God's love is going to shine through and get you through that. And those things provide the boundaries. We live within that truth. We're saved, and being honest and truthful about ourselves and what's going on in the relationship provides boundaries. When you can actually express to your spouse in freedom how you feel about something, you know that a boundary is being placed. If you go to your spouse and you say, want to talk to you about this situation. Let's say you go, okay, I'm not going to use a specific. I'm just going to say, there's a specific situation in your relationship, and your spouse tells you at some point afterwards that, you know, oh, you remember we went and did, and, well, there was a point where I was really uncomfortable because you did this, or you said this, or you acted this way. Is that kind of setting a boundary? Some of you are like, huh? But really what that is, you have to think about it. Your spouse is expressing to you where the discomfort started. And so they're saying to you, this, you know, if you love me, if you care about me, if you want to make things better and grow together, then my hope, my expectation, expectation of you loving me enough to understand that this is a boundary now. Because I've expressed it to you, I've told you it's important to me. It's basically like putting a stake in the ground and saying, or, you know, drawing a line in the sand, don't cross that line. I'm not talking about rules. I'm not talking about regulations. I'm not talking about the other person lording over you. I'm telling you, it's about opening their heart to you and telling you, this is where my discomfort level is, please don't cross it. And if you care enough about the other person, it should be important enough to you to make every attempt possible to not do it again. Would you agree with me? Yes. So, all of us that are sitting in this room, we realize, hey, Fusion is fun, Fusion is kind of laid back, we laugh a little bit, we have a good time, but it is founded on God's principles. Okay? We all can't forget about the fact of who we are and whose we are. And if you're practicing God's principles, hopefully they are functioning well in your marriage. You know? We got the basics. Don't lie. Don't commit adultery. Don't covet. Don't give to others. Love one another. Be compassionate. Forgive. Those are all examples. And if you think about your relationship, think about those principles. Which ones have been violated in your relationship? And think about what the consequences are when those are violated. We know that for every action, there's a reaction, right? And we know that for every wrong, there's a price to pay. Right? Right? So there's consequences to everything that we do wrong. If we're violating principles, and there's consequences to be paid, then we need to start working a plan on how to get boundaries back in place or actually establish those boundaries so that doesn't happen again. Listen, I don't care who you are sitting out there or where your relationship is, how many just would like to enjoy life? Yes. Anybody here not want to enjoy life? You know, and there's enough outside influences in the world to affect how we feel, how we think, man, when I come home, I don't want to have grief with my wife. Right. I just want to, when I come home, I want that to be my refuge. I want to come home and I just want my wife to be waiting there with, I just want my wife to be there. I want to come home and I want that to be a place of peace. I don't want to come home and be into, so if I'm doing everything I can to set boundaries and listen to her boundaries and work on boundaries, then I believe that I'm working in the right way. And if you think about your own life, think about a time when maybe you gave your spouse a false impression of your feelings or your perspective of the relationship. You know? I'm sure there's been a time in your relationship when the other person came to you and goes, everything okay? Yeah, everything's fine. No, right? I would never. Man, you don't want to deal with it. There's stuff going on, but you ain't ready to deal with it right now. Is everything okay? Fine. No, really, you can tell me because, I want to, and it's fine. Everything's fine. Now, if you go to your woman and you ask her and she says fine, fine does not mean fine. Fine means you better figure out what's wrong. Okay? Fine is not fine with a woman. but you want to be able to understand. And if you give them that false impression, why do you choose to do it? Because you don't want to deal with it, because you want peace. You don't really want to express yourself because you know that they're not going to agree with you, but this is where you have to come. And there's consequences for not being honest about the situation. Is everything okay? Everything is fine. Okay, well, you said everything is fine, so I'm just going to, but really you're still in the same situation because you know everything is not fine. And that's a consequence.
And that is where, like if the wife says, well, fine. And sometimes the husband, because like you said, we're not telepathically, you're not in my head. So sometimes your spouse will think things are fine because they're fine with him. So if you're not communicating and you're not expressing what's bothering you, then your spouse doesn't know.
That's true. Okay, I know it's 10:15. You mind if I keep you a few minutes over? No? Yes, we're good? Yes. Go ahead.
This was helpful to me after many, many years of marriage. I finally figured out how to say something like this. You have a conflict, and then I wouldn't get in right then, but later to go and say, and figure out my feeling. Say, I felt devalued or disrespected. I felt that when you said or did such and such. Was
Right.
that your intent? Right away, he would respond with, well, of course not. Then we could communicate.
And if you're the kind of person that can't communicate well, you have a problem standing and talking in front of the other person, write it down.
Oh,
Maybe you're that person that, you could write, man, I can express myself, I can write a book on telling people how I feel. If you're not the greatest when it comes to sitting in front of your spouse and you feel like you're stepping all over your tongue when you try to talk, write it down.
Or text it.
But remember, it's evidence,
Yeah.
so be careful what you
That's right. But when you have those situations, consequences define what you will and will not allow yourself to be exposed to. When words fail to communicate, then actions do. And so I'm sure that there's consequences of pain or lost help, you or your spouse. When those consequences happen, they will help you to better understand the boundaries. Unfortunately, there's a saying out there, a secular saying that says you live and you learn, right? So when you go through something, it's like, I know the Hispanic families have this big thing. It's like, you let the kids do something and they get hurt. It's like, bet you won't do that again, right? You won't do that again. So, but that's kind of like the same thing in your relationship. You go through something in your relationship and you have a bad consequence from whatever happens in that relationship. You better learn real quick. Oh, snap, I better not do that again.
Yeah.
Right? That happens more with guys than anything because, we're always the ones that are messing up. But, you learn. I better not do that again because I don't want to suffer those consequences. Man, there's no guy out there that wants their woman mad at him. We just have a tendency to perfect that. Man, I can make my woman mad at me without even putting really any effort into it. And if there's probably a current situation in your life right now that you can think about using the consequences to be an effective communicator of your boundaries. If you're that kind of person, because I know there's people that shared in here before, when I get angry, I just don't communicate.
Yeah.
Well, that's a boundary in and of itself. You set up that boundary to where it's like, not only is that a boundary, but I'm in nowhere's land. And there's consequences to everything. But a pure heart and the commitment to work on things are really necessary because we follow the advice of Proverbs to guard your heart. Proverbs will tell you right there in your notes, guard your heart above all else because it determines the course of your life. Man, if you walk around with a hard heart, you're going to have a very hard time communicating, forgiving, loving, compassionate. You're going to have a hard time with that. I mean, Joel Osteen, probably, some of you like him, some of you can't stand him, whatever the case may be, but some of his vocabulary, the top 10 words of his vocabulary is love. You got love one another, love your dog, love your
I
wife,
feel loved.
you
I
know.
feel like Jesus loves me when I listen.
You got, but he's, the guy's a smart guy because it's true. If God is love, then how is love not a benefit to us? Right? So it's got to be whatever that happens, you have to guard your heart. And there's risks that come when we establish emotional distance, right? When you are to the point where you can't communicate and you become separated emotionally, that's a national disaster. Emotional distance can be, can be a choice. Well, I'm just going to, I'm going to shut up. I'm not going to talk about it. I just want to separate it. And, that can be okay for a time, but you always need to come back and be able to bring it full circle to be able to communicate so that ultimately you want to make that stronger. Sometimes when everything else fails, people wind up getting away from each other until the hurt can stop. Some people some people get mad. It's like, I'm going for a ride in my car. I'm going for a ride on my motorcycle. I'm going for a ride on an airplane. I don't know, whatever it is that you do, but you separate for a while so that you can get that time to protect yourself, time to think, time to heal, time to learn new
We don't
things.
mean separate and
No, separating just, I'm not talking about separating. I'm just talking about taking yourself out of the equation, out of that situation for a time. Listen, God always provides help from his family to those who need it. From his family. The question is, are you part of his family? And if you notice on the last page, there's boundary building. There's things for you to do at home. You want to do them at home? Phenomenal. You don't want to do them at home? Phenomenal. Whatever you choose, that's up to you. But I try to give you the tools to take with you, to put into practice, to work on, okay? So that you can be prepared for the things. I really highly doubt that I have ever taken the time to write anything or put anything in there that's bad information. So take that stuff and use it. I want to close in prayer, and then we'll take an offering, and then we're going to ask for volunteers for food for next week, okay? So bow your heads just for a minute. God, we come before you this morning, and Lord, after just today's session, Father, I pray that people see more clearly. I pray that they see what a higher calling marriage is. I pray that in order for us to respond to that calling, to help us learn to take ownership of our feelings, our attitudes, our behaviors, to take responsibility for our choices, our desires, our thoughts, our values, our talents. And Lord, help us to grant our spouse freedom and act on the freedom that our spouse gives to us. And give us wisdom as when we use words, when we talk in truth and about consequences and distance and other people. And Lord, we pray for time to build and strengthen our boundaries. And Lord, as we go into this journey toward a healthier marriage, I know that we feel vulnerable. I know that you're going to be with us each step of the way, and that your presence gives us hope and the willingness to keep going. And as we submit ourselves to you, we ask that you be at work in our spouse, even as you work on us to be more like you. In your name we pray. Amen. Amen. All right. So